Hi, everyone. It's Tanya Meisenholder coming to you from 30 by 30. I'm here today with Bridget Truxillo. Bridget, I did say that correctly, right?
Good job. We didn't even practice it. Good job.
All right, awesome. And we are going to be spending a little bit of our time with you this morning. A few housekeeping items before we get started. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar. It will be on our 30 by 30 website within the next week or so. So if you want to go back and watch any portion of it, please feel free to do so. The webinar will run about 45 to 50 minutes, and we'll try and leave a few minutes at the end for questions, but please feel free to put them in the chat as we move on throughout the conversation. Also, please remember to keep your phones muted as we really, it will interrupt the session otherwise. So, thanks everyone for being here today. I'm really, really excited about this conversation with Bridget, and Bridget is with Lady Law Shield. She brings a truly unique perspective. She was a deputy sheriff in Florida, and she was also the only female on the SWAT team. And now she's an attorney who focuses on the legal challenges that face women in policing. So Bridget and I met last year at the NALI conference, the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives. And that's how we got this conversation started. She did a great panel with a few women where really talked about sexual harassment and what that looked like in the workplace. It was there was some women there that it was very brave in terms of what they said, and the experience that she was able to talk about with them with sexual harassment in particular. Hey, so Max, of course, I jumped right on that and really wanted to get her involved and on a webinar. So really glad that we met there. Today, she's going to be sharing some insights on some of the issues that face women in the workplace and men at times: sexual harassment, pregnancy, nursing protections, return to work, and more. And we're going to focus on what leaders need to know to comply with the law, avoid pitfalls, and create policies that support recruitment, retention, and officer well-being. Bridget, thank you so much for being here. And let's get started.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Tanya. Thank you.
You're welcome. So to start with, can you share how your experiences as a deputy and a SWAT officer and now an attorney kind of shapes your work today?
For sure. So yes, obviously it was deputy sheriff, and I started out in patrol like everybody does. Within a year, I was in the undercover narcotics unit, so was buying crack for a living, like I tell people all the time. And then around the same time, I made the SWAT team. Again, like Tanya said, I was the only female member of the SWAT team. And we were not a full-time team. We were what you call a call out. And a lot of the guys on the narcotics unit with me were also SWAT. So we were together all the time. And I say to everybody, well, being on a SWAT team was one of the coolest experiences of my life, and also one of the hardest. And ultimately, it's the reason why I left law enforcement, or just the team of that I was working with all the time. Like I said, we were just always together. We were either doing narcotic stuff together or doing SWAT stuff together. My lieutenant in narcotics was the SWAT commander, so I never got away from any of them. And that was okay for a long time, but the issues that I faced over those 3 years were I was never out of trouble. You make a special team and you're on a probation for however long. I was probably on probation for a year and a half. They just kept extending it or finding something or writing me up or giving me more. One time I made a mistake and I got 500 mountain climbers. I think I broke those up into like sets of 50, just so you know. I didn't do 500 straight. And ultimately, one of my teammates, after about 2.5, 2 3/4 years of it, one of my teammates made a mistake that I had done something kind of similar. And of course, I got written up for it or some kind of letter in my file or something. But he was a SWAT captain and he was a sergeant in narcotics. And I went to my lieutenant and said, "Hey, I'm not asking for better treatment. I'm just asking for equal treatment." Um, and I even had a pretty good captain at the time, a very good captain. And he came to me at one point, he pulled me into his office and he said, and at the time, like anytime somebody came to our narcotics office, my maiden name was Baragona. My sergeant would come in and go, "Baragona, come here." And it literally got to the point where the guys in the office would turn to me and say, "What did you do now?" And I would be like, F if I know. And I'd go to the office and they'd tell me something I did wrong, or I'd have to have a meeting about what was going wrong. And finally, my captain called me in one day. Um, oh, this was what I got in trouble for something. And the punishment was that I had to take, we worked narcotics. I think that day we got off at midnight. And I had to take this big giant RV that we had confiscated from somebody to go wash it. Well, I'd never driven an RV in my life. So as I was driving out of the sheriff's compound, I nicked the tail light and it cracked it. Go to, I didn't finish washing this RV till 2 o'clock in the morning. We live in kind of a rural, it was kind of a rural county like Gainesville, Florida, just outside of Gainesville. There's not that much. I had to drive it way out into the country to find a place that was big enough to wash an RV. I get back in the middle of the night, no big deal. I would go to work the next day, and in my box is a pink slip for a crash report. So my captain calls me in. Basically, what I found out later is my captain went to the team saying, "What are you guys doing? Like, first of all, why was Bridget driving an RV at 2 o'clock in the morning?" So he told him, and then he said to them, "You guys need to lay off. Like, you need to like back off of Bridget." Later, he calls me and Bridget, come to my office. I'm like, "Oh crap! Now it's the captain." And I walk in and he's like, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" And at first I'm like real pucker, like, "Oh God, what did I do?" And then I realized what he was asking me. He's asking me what's going on with my team, with my sergeants, all dudes, of course. And in that moment, I was just like, I mean, as much as I wanted help, I wanted somebody to say something for me. I wanted somebody to report it for me because I knew that if I reported that, I would be quote unquote that girl. I looked at my sergeant and I said, "Nope, I'm good." And that is my biggest regret of law enforcement. I do not regret going through all of that. I do not regret the fact that when I found out, so after I went to my lieutenant and said, "Hey, um, I, you know, equal treatment, not better treatment," and all that, he went to my team and told them that I was trying to rat out one of my own teammates. So when we were executing a search warrant a week or two later, that I had done all the undercover buys from a guy who basically like almost was he had like a rifle right next to him in the corner as I was buying it, way out in the boondocks. So if something bad went bad, like my backup couldn't be close because it would have been obvious. So if something had happened to me, there's no, like, I don't know if they could have saved me. So it's my search warrant that I got, 3 buys from a house, got the search warrant approved by a judge, and we go, and I find out that on the way to that search warrant, to execute that search warrant, that my team was calling me a snitch behind my back. And that day I had to pull over on the side of the road because I was crying so hard I couldn't see straight. Because that's when it hit me. It didn't matter. It didn't matter how good of an operator I was. It didn't matter how hard I worked in narcotics. And okay, I made a mistake, I'll do better. I made a mistake, I'll do better. And I ask people all the time, anybody on this call, if you all had your videos on, and let's say raise your hand if you've never made a mistake at work. Nobody would raise your hand. But that is not the standard of they're doing wrong by me because I didn't make a mistake. They're wrong. I didn't make that mistake. You made a mistake. The issue is how are they treating your mistakes versus everybody else's mistakes? And it took me 3 years of enduring it, as I'm sure, and so many of my clients are like, "Yep, that's me too." And I'm sure there's a lot of people in this call, if you've been in law enforcement for at least 5 years, you know what I'm talking about. And so ultimately, it got to the point where I realized I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know who to turn to get help. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who I could trust. I was in a union. And by the way, I'm a big fan of unions. If nothing else, it is your insurance plan in case you have a use of force, you get criminally indicted for something. I promise you cannot afford a criminal defense attorney, not a good one. So make sure you have that, whatever union or association, whatever it's called for you, pay for that because it's worth it for the defense, the criminal defense. But I didn't trust my union rep. I didn't even know if I had a union attorney I could call. And I wouldn't have even asked my rep if I could because then that would have set off a firestorm. And so fast forward to me starting Lady Law Shield is I want to be, and I am the person I could have called back then, like the person to trust, the person who understands it. I've been through it. So that is what has led to what I do now. I left law enforcement, went to law school, moved to Texas for my husband. I say it's his fault because otherwise I'd be living in Florida on the water with a boat in my backyard. But this is okay too. I have 3 wonderful, beautiful kids. And now I can help all law enforcement, not just ladies. I mean, the majority of my clients are still men, but certainly women have some very unique issues that they face. And obviously, I know what that's like firsthand. So that's what led me to where I am. I'm very passionate about helping law enforcement officers try and attack, how do you face the problem, attack the problem, fix the problem for you personally. Because sometimes that doesn't mean you're going to fix it all at the department, but I can at least let you know, like, here's what you need to do about it for you to take steps and positive action so that you can start to feel more in control of what's happening with your life so that you don't ever get to that very slippery slope of mental health decline. I've had clients who've attempted suicide. I could tell stories of women I know that have been through these things that did commit suicide. And, I know that's an extreme example of what can happen, but certainly let's just never get there.
Yeah, it's, you think about the mental health toll that this profession has on everyone, whether, regardless of gender or whether you're sworn professional staff, any of that. And then really that internal quality of life and organizational justice, how much does that affect
Mhm.
you and your wellness? So when we met at Nolly, you did a quick poll of the audience, which I think you've done several times, and asked the women primarily there, how many of them had experienced sexual harassment or witnessed it. And the
Mhm.
numbers, unsurprisingly, based on the research that we've done at 30 by 30, were quite high.
Yeah.
So what do you hear most often from women officers about sexual harassment?
So one of the things I want to point out is um, harassment or discrimination. I get both of those. And what I want to clarify on sexual is that's the way the EEOC identifies it. And what I call it is gender discrimination. Because what that means is it doesn't have to be like somebody grabbed my boob or my butt, which that happens. It amazes me in today's world that that happens, but it does. But when you say sexual harassment, sexual or gender, that to me, it's like it's based on your gender, you being treated differently than because of your gender. And again, did you make a mistake or did you do something like me? I forgot to, we had this lockers for evidence and it was like old school, like middle school lockers. You close it and it locks and you're supposed to have a key. Well, it was set up so that behind on the back side of those lockers is where the evidence people would get it. So if we put something, and the only way that kept it from closing was those old school like erasers you'd put on the top of a pencil, when we were little, those little
Yep.
orange. Anyway, so it was on the back, like, so if you took that off, you had to be careful because it would close all the way, lock it, and then if you weren't done, you'd have to do another locker, and more paperwork, whatever. Well, one time I took off that little eraser and it didn't close all the way. So therefore, the knife that I'd put into the proper container and, sealed it with the styrofoam stoppers and all that, didn't close all the way. And they came in the next day and like, oh, this is open. And I got, after the investigation, where the two guys I was doing the investigation with, who also were involved in evidence and also were standing right there with me, but ultimately it was my report. I'm the one that turned in the report. And of course, I wasn't going to throw them, and I wasn't going to say, well, he was right there too. He could have closed it. I just said, yep, you're right. It's my report. It was my responsibility. I got an unpaid day off for that. Well, I'm not aware of any of the guys getting an unpaid day off. Like, did I violate a policy? Sure. Yes. Did it deserve an unpaid day off? No. And also at that point, was I like, F all of you, I'm leaving. I mean, I was like, you guys, I was so mad. And honestly, I was mad for like 13 years. I was like, you guys are stupid. I'm leaving because if I stay around here too long, I'm gonna become stupid like you. I mean, I was mad. And that's not a healthy place to be for a law enforcement officer. You don't want your mad to be right at the surface where if something like scratches you or offends you, you're all of a sudden like going to blows or pulling your gun or whatever. So what I see all the time is the disparate treatment. I have a client who we could show. Ultimately, they fired her because they said, "Oh, you can't go to this training because we can't afford it. If you want to do it, you're gonna have to take your personal time off." She's like, "Okay, I will." Well, then she got another agency to sponsor her and pay for that. Well, they found out about it and got mad and said, "You violated policy. you're not you so they made up some stuff. And then they, as they were looking into that, they made up another issue. They had, all of a sudden they started saying, well, nobody on your department likes you. You are a problem. We're going to do an internal affairs investigation on whether or not you're an awful supervisor. Never ever had been told she was a bad supervisor before. So I'll try not to make this too long. Ultimately, she got fired. And now we're saying, like, look, not only is this disparate treatment in the way that you made up this investigation to find something to fire her for, you like, I could show dozens of, like, probably a dozen times for her. Okay, maybe that's dramatic. 8 times where she requested training, they told her no, all these reasons, but then the guy got to go. Can I go to this training? No, 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 no. Here's all these reasons, but then a guy got to go. That's disparate treatment. And what's important is that you look at it and say, okay, I made a mistake. But what I say, I see it all the time. And ultimately what happens is you get to the point where you just can't take it anymore. I was like that. I was driving to work thinking, if they could just leave me alone today, if they could just for a day leave me alone. And it was just never ending. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if any of this is ringing a bell with your life, or anybody that you're working with, you're like, oh, I think this is happening to this person. It's looking at it from a, are you perfect? No, but that's not the standard in the EEOC or in trial. It is, can you show a factual narrative? I was going to say a story, but a factual narrative that you were going to put into a report of, say, here's what happened to me. Here's how they did it different. Here's what
Busy
happened to
watching the
me. Here's how
call.
they did it different.
Busy
And
watching the
I
call.
guarantee you that you would be able to tell me examples of how that's different. And that is important. If you think this is happening to you, start writing that down. And it's not tattletaling. Um, and I'm sure I can say this in probably every question is, because you must do this for yourself. Number one, nobody can do it. And this is like, and I can address this a little bit later, and so I won't do it too long, but you must do this for yourself. And in this question, I will say, because it is important for your mental health to do that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it makes me think about, the definition of sexual harassment, which is, I believe, under EEOC, a form of gender discrimination is how it's framed. And we've talked to so many women over the course of 30 by 30, and the academic research, supports this. But sexual harassment is high in law enforcement profession, but so are things like what you're referring to, bullying, intimidation, disrespect, disparate treatment. But I will, it's a question for you. At least my time in the NYPD and in EEO, some of those things can be really challenging to prove.
Hmm.
And oftentimes they're unsubstantiated. So you may file a report and have a claim, but it will affect you while you're on the job, because people then kind of ultimately find out that you filed those reports.
Hmm.
Is that your experience, that many women or men don't report because they're concerned that there won't actually be anything that comes of it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, number one, we're a cynical bunch. Again, if you're not cynical yet, it just means you haven't been in law enforcement long enough. That was one of the things I really struggled with very early on in law enforcement, was how do you balance this, like, needing to be aware of the dangers in the world, like pulling somebody over and needing to be prepared for that to be somebody who's like, coming out guns a-blazing because, oh, I'm not going to go back to prison, or you just never know the call you're going to get dispatched to. Um, Domestic violence and traffic stops, so you just never know what could happen. Um, and so because of that, how do you balance the good? How do you balance needing to be prepared for anybody wanting to kill you or attack you at any moment, including when you're just sitting in your car eating a sandwich, and wanting to believe that there's good in life? And that's really hard to do. And the longer you do it, the more you think it just doesn't exist. And the longer you're in law enforcement, the more you see, oh, they don't do anything. They don't care. They don't give a poop. I'm gonna try and make this G-rated, so I'm gonna use lots of words I allow my kids to say. Um, they don't give a heck. They don't give a poop about, all of those things. So, it is that factual that sometimes nothing changes. Yes, that happens. And I'm not going to ever lie to anybody about that. But to me, the most important part about having been through it is I left anyway. My career with them was going to be crap anyway. Like, first of all, in today's world, not, I think young people, no offense to any young people that might be on this call, switch jobs, and I don't necessarily think in this profession because there's so much work that goes into switching to another agency in terms of backgrounds and investigations and all that. But young people just switch jobs like they switch underwear, and and hopefully people are changing underwear. But it's just quick, and they move and they move. Oh, this isn't what I want. I'll move. This is what I want. I'll move. Some of it is it's just life, and things aren't always perfect, and you gotta tough it out. Like maybe in a couple years it'll be better, or I gotta do I was the FNG, um, effing new girl on, narcotics and SWAT for a while. So yes, I got the crap jobs. Yes, it was always my turn to wash the big van, our equipment van. Yes, it was my job to always do that, or the one to do the paperwork and all that. And some of that you just got to get through. That's not harassment or discrimination. And I do tell that to people sometimes. Like, look, what you're telling me is not illegal. Number one, it could just be because you're new. And number two, it could be because it's the job, and the nature of the job is sometimes you've got to be real forceful in telling people to move quickly, and you don't have time to sit and explain and make it all rosy and soft. So sometimes it's the job itself, because if you're struggling with what the job is, you can't change that. And I've certainly had people who that's their issue. They really struggled with a critical incident that they went on, and I'm certainly very, sensitive to, you never know what it's like to have seen those really horrible things that officers see, especially when it comes to kids sometimes. And then the conversation is, look, I can help you, and I'm happy to connect you with people, but I think we should have a conversation around, is this the job for you right now? I've had clients where we're like, I don't know, and they're in tears, and I'll say, like, look, I don't know if you should go back to law enforcement after all this, especially for the ones who've already attempted suicide. Um, go do something else. I can help you with figuring out all of the ways that you have value in your professional life that you don't realize, because your experiences in law enforcement are transferable in the civilian world. Sometimes you just need to know how to rewrite that. Um, and I feel like I got off course because I can just talk about this and talk about this. But
It's great.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure at this point if I answered the question.
You did. I think about your experience and how that must have like formed you from an early age and really led you to this path you took, and supporting people in the legal space. I would imagine that a lot of folks that come to see you, it's really important to them that you're able to relate to some of those experiences. So let me turn to another question. What legal protections should leaders know about pregnancy and nursing and harassment?
Um, I just want to touch on that briefly with the last question is, even if you feel like the agency might not change anything, how do you know that if you never report it? That was my biggest mistake. I left without officially reporting anything, which means I was telling everybody there, everything you're doing is okay, and you should keep doing it. And it was not okay, and they should not have kept. My lieutenant told me 3 times explicitly, the only reason you are on this team is because the captain made me put you on this team. I could have reported that 3 times. I didn't. So even regardless of if they make any changes, they will not make any changes for sure if you don't report it. And if you do and you're scared, that's where somebody like me comes in. That's where, like, I'm not focused on the litigation end of things, which is way down if you decide to do something about this. I'm focused on you and what you need to do about this right now and the help that you need and giving you the words and giving you the plan. So the next one is, what do supervisors need to know? What can they do? Certainly, what I love about that question and for this group is, if your agency is doing something that violates PWFA, Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, or the Pump Act, I can't remember what that stands for, but it's breastfeeding. That is something that right away, take action right away, report it right away, because obviously it is a finite time. You're only pregnant for a certain amount of time. You're only breastfeeding for a certain amount of time. The Let me give you an example for the PWFA. We all know, but I've had some people say, like, you can go on light duty. Now, the size of your department, that matters in terms of where they can put you and what they can do. They cannot say, or at least they'd have to really explain to me in a lot of good detail about why they need to. They cannot send you home without pay. They cannot say, somebody told me one time in a Facebook group, my chief or whoever said they can't put me on light duty. It's a liability, and that I just have to go home and not get paid. Are you kidding me? Well, what do they do with the dudes who busted their knee and were sent to the training division for while he healed for 9 months? Like, that's no different. That used to be the standard. It used to be that you compare, it was like an ADA type standard. How are they treating other people on light duty issues? Um, I'm gonna tell you right now, and if I offend anybody on this, I'm really don't care. Do not, please do not carry a gun and a badge or a shield and display yourself to the public as being somebody that will that to you're going to be called upon. If you have a gun and a badge, I don't care if you're not wearing a vest. I saw this post not too long ago. This lady was 9 months pregnant and out in the field with her gun and her badge on. When you have a gun and a badge on, you are telling the public, I am here for you. I am the one that will go towards the bullets if they start being fired. I will be the one to protect you. I will be the one to fight for you. Are you really going to do that when you're pregnant? You should not do that. If go light duty where you're not. If they take your badge and take your gun, great. Do not do this and put yourself in harm's way and your baby's life in harm's way. And if anybody's mad about this and wants to call me out on it and have a discussion about it, I am happy to do so.
No,
Um,
can I add one thing there, Bridget?
yes.
I think what some of our, I've been surprised, 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. I've talked to several that don't have a pregnancy policy.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
mind you,
Also, yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah.
agencies that don't have any women at all. So they don't think they need a pregnancy policy, and we could debate that. But I think for women, it's really important for them to understand their rights in those pregnancy policies.
Yep.
And to your
Yep.
point, legally, as far as I know, it's up to the pregnant officer to tell her supervisor when she needs to go on
Yep.
light duty. And
Yep.
I hear you on that. And I think there's a number of protections that have come into place. You think about lead-free ammunition if you're going to the range, so that women can stay on the job in some sort of position while
Mm.
they're pregnant. But there's a number of agencies that aren't aware of these
Yeah.
issues, and they
Right.
do the types of things that you're referring to.
Well, an example of that is to like training in Texas. There's a version of it in every state where you've got to certify like in the high liability stuff. And one of those is like, I think it's called alert in Texas, but I'm having a 50-year-old brain moment. Where you're required to like qualify and it's a use of force thing. But when you're pregnant, and I think it's like 24 months. I don't think it's every year. I can't, I could be, that's not the important part. Point is, this lady called me, she was pregnant. They had already transferred her to this school to work. It's like an elementary school, basically light duty. And then they said, hey, you got to go do this training. And she said, well, no, I don't need to do that training. I'm on light duty. I'm pregnant. I'm at this school for a reason. And I don't have to do that training until I have to get it done by August of next year, which would have been after she came back from maternity leave. So her sergeant, his is mistake number one. Her sergeant said, okay, well, then you got to get a letter from your doctor. Nope. Under the PWFA, they cannot make you give a letter. Second problem, once they got the letter from the doctor, they decided that she could no longer perform the essential functions of the job. And they said she was going to have to go home without pay until she could perform the essential functions of the job. So that's when she called me. They were basically saying, take this lesser job as like a receptionist in some other part of the city, which was going to cut her pay in half. And she was already making very little money. And they said, or just go home and don't work until you have your baby. So she called me. Within 48 hours, I figured out who the attorney was for them, sent a letter and an email to this attorney saying, you can't do this. This violates PWFA, which the sergeant was probably not aware of. And I don't fault him for request. Somebody's told him like, oh, you got to get a letter. Like you cannot request a letter. Do not give them the letter. And I called their attorney. She was back at work the next day and got her already and was given the 2 days of no pay that they had already done for her. Those things can be fixed quickly. Another example, like the Pump Act. Lady I talked to, I was at the Women of Law Enforcement conference in Fort Worth last week, and a girl came up to me saying that when she was breastfeeding, um, there was no bathroom she could use. If there was a bathroom, there was no light inside. So if she went inside to lock the door, there was no way to control the light, only from the outside. And so people would turn the light off. If she was in there locked so she could have privacy, then she'd have no light. One example is like they wouldn't allow her to have a chair because it wasn't fair for the guys if they didn't get a chair. Another example is a lieutenant with a female in a room, like they're getting ready to redo their entire department. So the female said, okay, if you're redoing the rooms, are you going to have like a mother's room? And he ended up humiliating her for asking the question in a room full of 40 officers, where she was obviously the one of only like couple women. Those things right away should be reported to HR. If you're in a city, report it to your city manager. You need to, if I were you, I'd file it as a written complaint or notice, putting them on notice that this is happening because those things have to be done quickly. And from a supervisor perspective, I want you to know that those things, like if it, once when that gets to the EEOC, they are interpreting those things very broadly in favor of the complainant versus, and I'll also be honest with you, harassment and discrimination, those are hard cases. Just like Tanya said, those are hard cases to prove. That, and then that's not the point of why you should report it. I'll go back to my earlier statement. There's reporting it is for you. It starts with you. But with PWFA and the Pump Act, those need to be reported right away because they need to be remedied right away. And certainly I offer that service with women nationwide, and can advise supervisors and leaders on how do we do this? What procedure? What do we need to tell the women? Like how, what process do we need to tell them to follow if this is happening? Because as a supervisor, if you're seeing it, yes, you should report. That's no different than there's a policy that says if you're aware of harassment discrimination, you're required to report it, period. This falls under the EEOC. If you find that someone's pregnancy rights or breastfeeding rights are being violated, you're required to report that. Now, your policy probably doesn't say PWFA or Pump Act because those are relatively new and they just don't say that explicitly. But if it falls under the EEOC umbrella, that also includes FMLA retaliation, workers' comp retaliation. If it falls under the EEOC umbrella, you need to report it. But also reaching out to your female officers or deputies or constables in Texas, we have constables individually and saying, "Hey, I see this might be happening. Do you want any help?" Um, you know, that kind of stuff. Certainly, I could expand on that with anybody that wants it later. And, but yeah, they're
So, I mean, we touched on this a little bit, but like, what are like the top common mistakes that you see that agencies make? I think one of them is not having a clear understanding of the law to begin with, and not putting those policies in place. But could you expand on that or add to it, I should say?
yes. Not so this is like this doesn't happen at NYPD or some of the agents, other big agencies that I know of that have like an internal division, whether they handle it through IAD, or whether they handle it through an EEO, like a separate division. Like NYPD is big enough where they separate that out. I think like Dallas Police Department, I think separates it out, kind of, sort of. But when they look at it, and this predominant, also the smaller your department, the more likely that this goes to HR, and HR will look at it and say, "Oh, I looked into it. I didn't think this was an issue, so we closed it out." That is the biggest mistake I see agencies make. It is not up to one individual to determine if there's merit in a complaint. You must look into it. Another really big mistake I see agencies making is if one of the people being involved in the complaint itself is also involved in the investigation. That is just, law enforcement investigations 101. You can't be the one investigating the claim against you. I have a sheriff, a chief, who we have a sexual harassment retaliation claim against him. When she finally reported it, he found out about it. He's the one that instructed internal affairs to investigate her, and then he's the one that had final say on terminating her. The complaint was solely about him and the sexual comments that he made. That in and of itself, like, are you kidding me? And so whether you bring in, like in Texas, let's say you bring in the Texas Rangers, be above board, be honest about it. That shows that you're willing to be transparent about it. Now this particular chief, there's no way he would have brought them in because they are like he's done the same thing twice to women, and we have it on the record. So the biggest mistakes I see agencies making are kind of sort of sweeping it under the rug and not truly investigating it, because when it goes beyond your department, that's going to matter to the investigators outside of your department that are looking at it. And that is the biggest mistake. And all the way down to like corporal or sergeant, probably mostly sergeants. I think corporals don't necessarily depending on where you are, aren't held to the same liability standard. But you'll be added to a lawsuit if you're aware of something and did nothing about it. You will. Now, ultimately, can you afford to pay out? No. And then ultimately, it's they're looking for the deep pockets, and the deep pockets is your agency who can pay if on any type of settlement or verdict. Um, but you will be thrown in that lawsuit if you're aware of something and did absolutely nothing. And even worse, if you tried to cover up or help the offender. It's not your job to determine merit. You don't have to agree. It's like I tell my kids sometimes. I don't need you to agree with what I'm saying or understand what I'm saying, but I do need you to hear me. And if you're aware of and or somebody does specifically complain to you, you've got to do the right things by that. You've got to look into it. You've got to pass it along. And certainly if they start to have retaliation against you because of that. I have a client where he's a sergeant and he was starting to ask around about some racial discrimination that was happening in his department. And now he's being demoted because the chief got mad that he was asking any questions, which means that she will be getting a new EEOC claim very soon. Um, because of how she's like, well, and their attorney, who's a dum-dum, said, well, they were really upset that he wasn't loyal. Like, do you read your own policies? Like, are you kidding me? That violates the law in so many ways. So fine, you'll just get another one.
Yeah, you touch on retaliation, and it makes me think, our co-founder of On Roman, incredible woman, she had, her own experiences in Newark, New Jersey. And I think being able to stand up and talk about your experience and what happened, and then proving retaliation is really tough at times. I saw that in the NYPD many times. And as you mentioned, EEO too, when you think about it, in some of the smaller agencies, it may not even be in your agency. It could be external to a city department, and folks don't know a lot about it. So for me, it's really hard for people to stand up and talk about these issues, especially depending on your rank and your role in the organization. But if you don't, then the entire field, right, is not moving forward in a way that we should. And if you if anyone knows Vaughn, you should check out her LinkedIn page and her new project, Sunshine Project. It's awesome. What are some simple steps that leaders can take right away
To fix problems.
to get this right? Yeah, to think about,
Um,
how do you address all of these issues in the workplace?
I think, okay, first I will say, like if it's an acute issue, meaning it's you know that something's happening right now, it's going to that person. And what I say from a supervisor, whether if it's happening to you, that's yeah, do something about it right now. But if you're seeing it somebody under you, somebody you're responsible for, you're in a leadership role and you have, under your chain of command, you're aware of this. It's talking to these people about it, letting them tell you the story. Like when my captain, like I kind of wish my captain would have tried twice and said, look, like this is a private conversation between you and me. Tell me what's going on. I'm not going to do anything about this, and I still get there's some scary because that was me. I was in that moment thinking, I can't say anything about this. This is going to turn out really bad for me. But in hindsight, it's like, okay, again, I'm gonna use my kids as an example. When I was trying to get them to eat broccoli when they were little, like everything is the rule of threes. They don't like it the first time. Who cares? Try it 3 times. You've got to try something at least 3 times. So follow the teaching toddlers to eat broccoli rule 3 times. Um, if you go to somebody and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm here for you, is there anything you want to talk about? No. Second time, give it another time in the right moment, in a private moment. Hey, I saw so and so happen. This is what I think is wrong about that. This is definitely confidential. Is there, what do you and encourage that? That goes so far in making a person feel heard and that they matter. Because what happens through all of this is they start to feel like they don't matter. They start to feel like the work that they do, we all come into this job, 90 to nothing, given everything we have to the job, probably in a very unhealthy way. We're not doing enough of like keeping important things outside of law enforcement. Um, but they're everything they have is they eat it, sleep it, breathe it, talk about it. Like their family's probably like, okay, already, I get it, you're a cop. Um, and then you always want to be with cops and you want to talk about the thing. And so it can be a very, very dangerous place from a constitutional law perspective and the decisions they're making and a mental health perspective when you start to feel like everything that you've given to the job now means nothing. Because that's when I would pulled over to the side of the street crying so hard, like, oh my gosh, I've been on SWAT team, I've been on the narcotics unit. I competed in two international SWAT team competitions. They still have it every year, SWAT Roundup International in Orlando. I had to beat out my own team members to make the competition team. It was a team of six. We went and there were 74, 2 different years, 74, 76 teams. And all 74, 76 times six on each team. There's maybe two women. And and then even individual competitions, like I had to beat out one more guy to compete. Only five would compete in the individual things. So the first year I went, I competed every day, which means that there was a guy on the, I know another guy on the team, not as good as me. Did all this stuff, trained my butt off. And at the end of the day, they were saying, we don't care about anything that you've done. And that was hard. And I am the type person I will complain and bitch and moan and vent. But then, and I have this tattoo on my wrist. It's a sunrise, because I believe every day presents an opportunity. The sun's always gonna rise tomorrow. So the next day, I'm just gonna put my big girl clean panties on and just try again. So I'm thankful that I have that. And I've also been like, I exercise all the time. I always worked hard on eating well. So that matters in terms of being able to combat the feelings. So from a leader perspective, it is have the conversation, ask what you can do, keep it confidential. Do not repeat what they tell you. Everybody in law enforcement knows there is not a single profession that can gossip as quickly as law enforcement, period. Keep it to yourself, unless and until you feel like you actually need to report something. And I would do that if you think it's getting to, like, there's a girl in Austin, maybe I can't remember, I think it was 2 years ago this fall, who committed suicide and left two kids behind. I wish her sergeant would have said, I don't care what you're saying. I'm reporting this, because maybe she would still be alive. Um, and I'm not putting everybody's lives on your shoulders. And also you're kind of in that field and you're in that profession anyway, where you have the public's lives on your shoulders. So what I encourage you to do is to have conversations and follow up. And if you're not sure, call me. Reach out to me. Like, I'm not sure what's happening. I don't know what I should do about this, and book a call with me. Because that's what I do.
I'm glad you do it. It's a tough space to be in. You know, it does make me think the importance of supervisors really understanding their obligations, especially around failure to report. So, you know, I had a conversation with a colleague recently, and if you witness something and you don't report it, and you're a supervisor, then you're going to take the hit too.
Yeah.
Now, if the victim complainant doesn't want to file a report, that's on them. But you
Yep.
as a supervisor, if you're aware of it, you have an obligation
Yep.
to do that. Puts you in a really difficult spot. But I always, you know, would tell people during my prior career is you make the notification and let folks kind of figure it out from there. It's a tough space to be in. You know, thinking about recruitment and retention and officer well-being. We touched on this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on policies and how they can be helpful with recruitment, retention, and officer well-being
For women?
for anyone?
Yes. Okay. Well, let me focus on women. Um, if you do not have a maternity leave policy, welcome to 2025, where that is baffling to me. And I talked to a sergeant. I think she's a sergeant. I have my stack of cards here. I emailed her yesterday saying, hey, we need to talk about this, because she is um, a lieutenant, where they have about 17 women in their department, and there's no maternity leave policy. One of the largest cities in the state of Florida, their department, their policy is use up all your sick pay, use up all your vacation time, and then whatever else time you just don't get paid. Well, if I could see everybody, like, raise your hand if you have kids. And how often, like, what happens if you need a vacation day for your kid or a sick day for your kid? I guess maybe some agencies you get to earn an extra day once a quarter or something, but what are you talking about? Like, that is ridiculous. You need to have, and it doesn't affect like, and sometimes that's a city thing, but here's one of the things I do is I look at not just as it a even if you're at a sheriff, you're still in a county, and there are like your county is the one that's providing your insurance, not the sheriff directly. So I reach out to city commissioners, mayors, city managers, county officials, county attorneys saying, hey, here's the issue. We need to, like, this can be changed. This doesn't cost you, maybe it'll cost them some money. So maybe it's like trying to steer around an iceberg. Like sometimes it goes slowly. You got to take a wide berth, or it takes a little while for you to see that the ship is turning. But maybe you need somebody. Like one of the things I'm doing is starting to be an attorney for associations where they come to me and say, hey, this is the problem, like this. Like, let's say you're in an association and the women, like, there's no maternity leave policy. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's write this down. Who can we reach out to? We need to talk to the city manager and say, hey, we need to make you guys aware of this. So next year, when you're looking at a budgeting thing, what can we do to get this as part of your policy? The higher up you go, and this is very important. I was talking with Chief Cheryl Victorian out of Waco PD. Um, Black female, and this like she's amazing. Like the
We
stuff.
love Cheryl. She's one
Yes.
of our biggest 30 by 30 fans.
Yes. Yeah. Through not. Yeah. I met her. I told her. I said I may or may not have stalked you for the last couple of years, but like she has such an amazing career, and I've followed it for a long time. And she's in the Texas Police Chiefs Association, so I've been talking with her. Like, because the chiefs get. I mean, I have a lot of clients that are chiefs, men and women. Just so you know. So Cheryl and I were talking about if you have experience and you have established credibility and you have a seat at the table, there is a lot we could do to that you can do. And I'm certainly happy to help with that to effectuate change. And you know, because you're at this level of experience, that sometimes it takes a little while to make change, but and great. That means tomorrow we get closer, and tomorrow we get closer, and tomorrow we get closer. Because I choose to believe in possibility. I choose to be positive, Polly. I choose to believe in abundance mentality, not scarcity mentality. And yes, that takes a lot of effort if you've been in law enforcement for a long time. But that's why let's talk, because I can help. Again, if you're in an association and you don't have somebody helping in this way, just let me know. I talk to people all the time about ways that I can help. Certainly, I get paid for that because I'm an attorney, but that's where I believe that my experiences hold the most value. Can I help you get to a lawsuit as an individual if you need to? Yes, I can do that. But I also believe that there's so much that can be done way before you ever get there. And for the ladies who have that experience, credibility, and the seat at the table, you really can start to present things in a way that it can make a difference for those that are under you and those that come after you.
I think and it's amazing how quickly time goes. We're almost to 11:20 Eastern time, so we're going to be wrapping up soon. But thank you so much for being here. And from my perspective, and I'd love for you to add on to this, but I think it's really important for agencies and leaders to be aware of their policies and what they should have.
Mhm.
Thinking about federal law, state law, local law, what are all those things? You mentioned, maternity policies, pregnancy, lactation. One thing to think about too, is there a way to put some of that in state legislation, like as a requirement or at the post level? But just having the policy isn't enough, right?
Yeah.
It's about education, and it's about making sure that people are actually following through. And part of what we're talking about here today, for those that are, have joined, is yes, there are issues around harassment and discrimination that can certainly lend themselves to lawsuits. But there's also lots of things that happen in the agency in terms of how people are treated, that we should be thinking about how best to address. So,
Mhm.
but before we start to wrap up, Bridget, like if leaders or supervisors or anyone on this call, remember just one thing from this webinar, from this conversation, what should that be?
Well,
I'll give you three things.
generically, I'll say like you must report it. If something's happening to you, you must report it. Everybody around you could see what's happening. You know it. People used to come up to me and say, "Oh, keep your head up." Or like, man, you guys seems like you have a target on your back. And in the one way, if they were like, keep your head up, like, get you on the shoulder, keep your head up. I think they're doing that, like encouraging you. But it made me mad because it meant you see what's happening and you're not doing anything to help me. And even if they did, like, it has to come from you. You have to be the one to say, go to your supervisor, your lieutenant, whatever, whoever the one above you is. If that person is the problem, you know you can jump your chain of command. Um, and you just got to report it. If you, and so from a reactive standpoint of something's happening, but I can also say that from a proactive standpoint of, if you don't have a maternity policy, report it means look at it, start the conversation, do something about it, reach out to the people who you think could help. The IACP has model policies on pretty much everything. And so you don't need to invent the wheel. It's already there. Any agency that does have a policy, my recommendation will reach out to three people. And again, if you have credibility and experience and you have a seat at the table, you probably have networked enough to know a lot of people. Email three laterals that you know at other agencies. Say, what is your policy and would you mind sharing it with me? And compare them. And then the last thing I guess I would say is ask for what you want. The worst thing they can have, what's the worst thing that can happen if you ask? They say no. And then my response to that is always ask why. If their answer is no, ask why, and then hopefully you get that in writing. Because whether it's an individual right that you're complaining for and you need help, or a global like agency thing, or your county or city, whoever's saying, no, we can't do that. Okay, but why? We don't have the money right now. Oh, great. Let's talk about next year's budget. There's always like, but why? The not answering it can help your case later. And then also the answer you get can help you formulate the answer and the solution. So ultimately it's that report it. And what I'm, as I say, whether it's reactively or proactively, there's different ways to look at that, but take action.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you know this better than me. That can be really hard to do.
Yeah.
And in policing, you're often told to have thick skin and this, that, and the other thing. So we do recognize how challenging reporting some of these issues are. And Bridget, great point. ICP has a great pregnancy and parental leave guide that you can use as models. If you want to reach out to us at 30 by 30, we have a number of policies from other agencies. There's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of people that want to help folks that are going through things in their agencies. Bridget's certainly one of them. Those of us at 30 by 30 are happy to help. So don't hesitate to reach out. You're not like alone, and it does affect your mental health.
Mhm.
Um, Bridget, thank you so much. We're out of time today for everyone. Really appreciate you being on with us. We're going to put a note on this on LinkedIn and make sure that you follow Bridget and Lady Law on LinkedIn as well. And we're going to push out some additional resources related to this. As a reminder, we'll put this on our website in about a week, and we encourage folks to take part in reviewing that again. And Bridget, just thank you so much for being with us at 30 by 30 today. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, of course, I'm happy to contribute. Love to help in any way I can. And I encourage anybody who's watching this now or later, sign up for my newsletter because like a lot, you may not always need me, but I try to provide monthly, give tips and information so that you know how to just like you know how to fix your gun and hopefully if it jams in a critical incident, I want you to know how it's like your tactical training. I want you to know right away when if it's wrong and what you should do about it if or when that happens to you. So I do encourage anybody to follow along with that, like I say, monthly email. Otherwise, yeah, I'm on social media, but Lady Law Shield, and I'm certainly very proud of it. Hope you guys never need me, but certainly I'm here if you do.
Thanks so much. All right, everyone, we're signing off for today. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you all next month.